They won't respect you until you respect yourself. There is a moment in life when you suddenly realize that the world has been responding to the version of you that you have been silently presenting. Not the version you imagine in your head, not the version you wish you could be. The world responds to the standard you set for yourself every day through your choices, your posture, your words, and your willingness to defend your own worth. Most people spend years feeling invisible, unheard, or disrespected, without understanding the real reason why. They look at others and wonder how some people walk into a room and immediately command attention, while they feel like an extra in their own story. They try to work harder, speak louder, be nicer, compromise more, yet the pattern continues. This is the silent contract of self-respect, and most people never realize they signed it long before they knew what it meant. The truth is simple and uncomfortable. No one will give you the respect you refuse to give yourself. You can demand it, you can argue for it, you can even beg for it, but it will never stick if the foundation inside you is unstable. Respect begins with the way you carry yourself when no one is watching. It begins with the moment you stop shrinking to keep others comfortable. It begins when you choose integrity over approval. It begins when you speak clearly instead of apologizing for existing. Stoic thinkers understood this long before the modern world complicated everything. They believed that the only authority that truly matters is the authority you hold over your own mind, your own reactions, your own identity. Once that foundation is stable, the world adjusts itself to match it. Most people are not treated poorly because the world is cruel. They are treated poorly because they have become used to betraying themselves in small ways, thousands of times, until it becomes a habit. They tolerate disrespect because they believe they deserve it. They accept crumbs because they think asking for more is selfish. They remain silent when their voice matters most because they fear being judged for wanting something better. Over time, that pattern becomes a signal. Without realizing it, you start communicating to everyone around you that your time is negotiable, your boundaries are flexible, and your value is uncertain. People respond exactly as expected. This video is not about forcing the world to treat you differently. It is about becoming someone who no longer needs to ask. When you understand the internal mechanics of self-respect, your outer world begins to transform in ways that once felt impossible. The shift does not start with courage or confidence. It starts with clarity. It starts with the decision to stop living as a weaker version of yourself. It starts with the understanding that respect is a mirror, not a request. What you project returns to you, and what you allow will become the pattern you repeat again and again. Today is the moment to confront that silent contract, to ask yourself what version of you has been negotiating your relationships, your opportunities, and your sense of identity. To understand how Stoic confidence is built not through dominance, but through self-command, you do not need to scream to be heard. You do not need to impress anyone to be valued. You only need to act like someone who knows where they stand and what they will no longer accept. Respect yourself first, and watch how everything around you begins to shift. This is the starting point of that transformation. Every day, without noticing, you are sending signals that tell the world exactly how to treat you. These signals are not loud, dramatic, or obvious. They are subtle, almost invisible, yet they shape every interaction you have. The Stoics understood that character is revealed not through speeches, but through the smallest movements of the soul. Modern life proves this constantly. People read you long before you open your mouth. They read the way you stand, the way you walk, the way you react to pressure, the way you fill silence, the way you surrender space or hold it. Your energy becomes a language, and everyone around you becomes fluent in it, even when you are not. There is a reason some people can say almost nothing and still command respect. Their presence carries weight. It is calm, grounded, and unapologetically firm. They do not rush their words. They do not fidget with uncertainty. They do not shrink to avoid discomfort. They have learned that their value is not negotiated through performance, but demonstrated through steadiness. This steadiness becomes a signal. It tells the world that they are not easily moved, not easily manipulated, and not easily dismissed. Stoic confidence is not loud, it is anchored. When you lack self-respect, your energy sends a very different message. You enter conversations hoping to be accepted instead of expecting to be taken seriously. You speak with hesitation because you fear being judged. You apologize for beliefs that require no apology. You give explanations no one asked for. You soften your boundaries to avoid confrontation. All of these habits broadcast uncertainty. People feel that uncertainty and respond to it instinctively. They interrupt you more often. They challenge your opinions. They disregard your time. They treat you as someone who can be bent because you have shown them you will bend yourself. Most people do not realize that their energy changes before their words do. They feel intimidated in certain environments and immediately fold inward, shrinking their posture, narrowing their voice, avoiding eye contact. They think they are being polite, but what they are broadcasting is fragility. The Stoics believed that the mind creates the posture of the body, not the other way around. If your inner world is chaotic or insecure, your external presence reveals it immediately. Respect begins in the pauses between your reactions, in the steadiness before you respond, in the slow, deliberate way you move through situations that previously made you anxious. The way you carry yourself becomes a message. This is who I am. This is what I tolerate. This is how I expect to be treated. The more consistent this message becomes, the more people adjust to it. This is why two people can enter the same room and have entirely different experiences. One is met with resistance because they resist themselves. The other is met with respect because they embody the calm authority that draws respect naturally. You cannot hide from the energy you broadcast. It is the first impression people receive and the last memory they keep. If you want others to treat you differently, you must first change the signals you are sending. Not by acting arrogant or forcing dominance, but by aligning your inner world with the identity you want to live. Stillness, presence, and a firm sense of self create a gravity that others instinctively recognize. The Stoics lived by this principle because they knew that confidence is not a performance. It is a reflection of how deeply you trust yourself. When you move through the world without looking for approval, your energy becomes undeniable. That is when respect begins to rise, not because you asked for it, but because you finally stopped undermining yourself. There is a type of betrayal that damages you more than any insult, rejection, or disrespect from the outside world. It is the betrayal you commit against yourself every time you abandon what you know is right, just to be tolerated, accepted, or liked. Most people think they lack confidence because others disrespect them. The truth is far more internal. People fail to take you seriously when you fail to take yourself seriously. Every time you silence your needs, swallow your truth, or pretend to agree with something you do not believe in, you teach the world that your voice is optional. This pattern becomes invisible to you but loud to everyone else. Stoic philosophy always began with the inner world. If you are not in harmony with yourself, nothing you build externally will stand. When you say yes to avoid discomfort, you signal that your time does not matter. When you apologize for wanting something reasonable, you signal that your desires are negotiable. When you downplay your achievements, you signal that your value is uncertain. When you let others cross your boundaries without consequence, you signal that you cannot protect the smallest part of your identity. These small betrayals accumulate until your self-respect erodes, and once that happens, the world mirrors it back to you with perfect accuracy. Most people do not realize how often they betray themselves because these actions feel normal. They think they are being kind, flexible, generous, or patient. Yet deep down, Their instincts tighten, their body resists, and their mind whispers that something is wrong. This inner tension is not weakness. It is the part of you that remembers who you truly are. Each time you ignore it, you weaken your ability to stand firm in your own life. Over time, this becomes a habit. You become someone who negotiates with your own boundaries instead of upholding them. That is when people sense they can push a little more, ask a little more, take a little more. The Stoics believed that self-command is the foundation of dignity. If you cannot command yourself, you cannot expect others to respect you. They understood that the first step to confidence is eliminating the moments where you act against your own principles. Look closely at your life, and you will see the pattern. You agree to plans you do not enjoy. You stay silent when someone crosses a line. You tolerate disrespect because confronting it feels uncomfortable. You shrink to avoid judgment. Each act feels small, but each one teaches others that you will tolerate more than you should. People do not respect someone who constantly abandons themselves. They do not trust someone whose identity shifts depending on the situation. They do not follow someone who cannot say no. Respect grows when others see that your words and actions align, when you set a boundary and stand by it, when you speak calmly but firmly, when you refuse to participate in situations that violate your principles, when your life reflects your values instead of your fears. This consistency communicates strength without aggression, confidence without arrogance, and worth without explanation. The world stops taking you seriously when you stop taking your own inner voice seriously. Every moment of self-betrayal weakens your presence. Every moment of self-alignment strengthens it. The turning point comes the instant you decide that your integrity is not up for negotiation. When you finally choose to stop abandoning yourself, people feel the shift. You no longer show up as someone hoping to be chosen. You show up as someone who has already chosen themselves. This is where self-respect begins to rebuild, and where the world begins to adjust around you. There is a quiet truth most people avoid, because it forces them to confront their own patterns. You are not disrespected at random. Disrespect enters through the edges of your life, through the places where your boundaries are unclear, fragile, or inconsistent. Boundaries are not walls meant to isolate you. They are definitions of who you are, where you stand, and what you will not allow. Without them, your identity becomes blurred. Your relationships become imbalanced, and your self-respect becomes unstable. Stoic confidence is not built on force or dominance. It is built on the calm certainty of someone who knows what deserves their energy and what does not. Most people misunderstand boundaries. They treat them as confrontations or declarations of war, when in reality, boundaries are agreements you make with yourself. They are the internal rules that guide how you respond to the world. They are the standards that prevent you from losing yourself in other people's expectations. When you do not define these standards, people will define them for you. They will test your tolerance, your silence, and your willingness to bend. Not because they are cruel, but because human nature is wired to seek the path of least resistance. If you do not protect what matters, others will assume it does not matter. The Stoics taught that a person without self-governance becomes a prisoner of their surroundings. A person with self-governance becomes the architect of their own freedom. Boundaries are the structure of this self-governance. They are not about controlling other people. They are about controlling what you permit, what you accept, and what you refuse. When you say yes to something that violates your principles, you are not being polite. You are giving away a piece of your identity. When you allow repeated disrespect, you are not being patient. You are training the world to believe that disrespect carries no consequence. The deepest problem is not that others cross your boundaries. It is that you keep reopening the door after you close it. You set a limit, but then you make exceptions. You speak up once, but stay silent the next time. You say you will not tolerate something, yet you allow it again because you do not want to seem difficult. This inconsistency confuses people. It signals that your boundaries are emotional reactions, not principles. Stoic boundaries are built on reason, not mood. They are stable, predictable, and anchored in values rather than impulses. When you become consistent, people learn exactly where you stand. Boundaries become powerful when they are simple, calm, and unwavering. You do not need dramatic speeches. You do not need emotional outbursts. You do not need to justify your limits. You need clarity. You need the courage to say no without guilt. You need the discipline to walk away when your standards are violated. You need the confidence to hold your ground even when someone pushes back. The more you practice this, the more your presence changes. People feel the shift. They sense the firmness in your voice, the steadiness in your posture, the certainty in your decisions. Respect rises naturally because you have stopped negotiating with your own dignity. Boundaries are the edges of your life. They define what you allow to enter, what you keep out, and what you choose to build. Without them, your self-respect cannot survive. With them, your self-respect becomes unshakable. When you show the world that you protect your energy, your time, and your identity, people respond in kind. The Stoics believed that the person who governs themselves commands quiet authority, not by force, but by the unwavering clarity of someone who knows exactly who they are. One of the most painful experiences in life is realizing that you keep encountering the same type of disrespect from different people, different faces, different relationships, different environments, yet the pattern repeats itself with unsettling precision. Most people interpret this as bad luck or the unavoidable cruelty of the world. They assume they are choosing the wrong friends, the wrong partners, the wrong workplaces. But the truth runs deeper and hits closer to home. You are not attracting these people by chance. You are reflecting something inward that the world is mirroring back to you. Change the reflection, and the world adjusts. Ignore it, and the cycle continues. The Stoics believed that external experiences often reveal the internal state of the mind. What you tolerate becomes familiar. What is familiar becomes acceptable. And what is acceptable becomes cyclical. That is why someone who lacks self-respect often meets the same kind of disrespect repeatedly. They gravitate toward situations that match their current sense of worth, not the worth they dream of having. They find comfort in the predictable pattern, even when the pattern hurts them. The mind clings to what it recognizes, not what it deserves. When you do not value yourself, you overlook the early signs of mistreatment. You excuse behavior that should have been questioned. You forgive actions that should have had consequences. You give second chances that should never have existed. These small choices act like invitations, silently signaling that your boundaries are open to negotiation. People who push limits sense this immediately. They test the edges of your tolerance, and when they find no resistance, they continue. This is not a curse. It is a mirrored response to your internal standard. The pattern becomes obvious once you step back. You notice the repetition. You see how the same dynamics reappear in different environments, the same disappointment dressed in different clothing, the same lack of consideration delivered through different personalities, the same erosion of your voice, your time, and your emotions. This happens because self-respect is not something you can fake. You cannot pretend to value yourself on the surface if your choices reveal the opposite. The world responds to the truth, not the image you try to project. Stoic philosophy teaches that awareness is the first step toward mastery. When you see the pattern clearly, you cannot continue living as if you are powerless. You begin to recognize your role in the cycle. You understand that the problem is not the people you meet, but the version of yourself you bring into those meetings. This realization is uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. It means you have the power to break the cycle, not by changing the world, but by changing the way you move through it. The mirror effect disappears the moment you enforce a standard you refuse to lower. When you become someone who walks away at the first sign of disrespect, the pattern stops. When you speak with clarity instead of fear, the pattern stops. When your boundaries are consistent instead of emotional, the pattern stops. When your identity is rooted in principle rather than insecurity, the pattern stops. People adjust to the version of you that refuses to abandon itself. If you want to stop attracting the same disrespect, you must stop being the same version of yourself who tolerated it. You must become someone whose presence communicates self-worth so clearly that only those who can match it remain. The world mirrors what you project, and the moment you strengthen your internal standard, the reflection changes. There is a turning point in every person's life when they realize that confidence is not something they gain from the world, but something they reclaim from themselves. Confidence is not a performance, it is not loud, it is not built on attention, validation, or admiration. True confidence is the quiet authority you hold over your own mind. It is the sense of inner command that does not waver when you are judged, questioned, or challenged. The Stoics understood that strength is not proven through dominance, but through the unwavering clarity of someone who governs themselves first. Most people chase confidence the wrong way. They look for reassurance in compliments. They wait for others to approve their choices. They search for external signs that they are worthy, hoping that someone else's recognition will become the missing piece. Yet this approach creates dependence. When your self-worth is tied to external approval, you are always one criticism away from collapse. You adjust yourself to every environment. You shift your opinions to avoid conflict. You suppress your truth to maintain peace. Over time, this erodes your inner authority until you no longer know who you are without the noise around you. The Stoic method begins with stillness, not silence but inner stability. You cannot command yourself if your mind is constantly shaken by fear, insecurity, or emotional turbulence. Stillness allows you to separate what you can control from what you cannot. It reminds you that other people's opinions do not define you, their reactions do not determine you, and their approval is not a prerequisite for your existence. When you stop seeking permission to be yourself, you begin to reclaim the parts of you that you abandoned along the way. Stoic confidence is built through disciplined emotion. This does not mean suppressing your feelings. It means guiding them instead of being guided by them. You acknowledge fear without obeying it. You acknowledge insecurity without collapsing under it. You acknowledge doubt without letting it dictate your choices. Strength grows every time you act according to your principles instead of your impulses. Each act of self-command reinforces your identity until you no longer need external validation to confirm who you are. Inner authority also requires rational evaluation. You must examine the beliefs that weaken you. How many times have you told yourself that you are not enough? How many opportunities have you lost because you assumed failure before trying? How often have you allowed imagined judgments to silence your voice? These thoughts are not truths. They are habits, and habits can be replaced. The Stoics trained their minds to challenge irrational thinking through reason. When you question the beliefs that undermine you, they lose their grip. When you replace them with principles grounded in truth, your presence strengthens naturally. True confidence is not loud, it is steady. It shows in the way you walk into a room without shrinking. It shows in the way you speak without rushing. It shows in the way you make decisions without constantly seeking reassurance. It shows in the way you uphold your boundaries without guilt or explanation. This steadiness becomes the foundation of self-respect. And self-respect becomes the foundation of the respect you receive from others. Reclaiming your inner authority does not require perfection. It requires alignment. When your actions match your values, when your choices match your identity, when your standards match your worth, you become someone who cannot be easily shaken. You stop arguing for your value because your presence communicates it. You stop explaining yourself because your decisions speak for you. You stop fearing judgment because you are anchored in who you are, not who others want you to be. This is the core of Stoic confidence. Not the ability to control the world, but the ability to control yourself within it. When you master this, respect follows naturally, because people recognize strength that does not depend on their approval. Respect does not appear suddenly. It builds gradually through the small, consistent choices you make every day. You cannot convince the world that you deserve respect. You must teach it through your behavior, your presence, and your standards. This is where the concept of a respect ritual becomes essential. It is not a routine built on ego or performance, but a disciplined practice that aligns your identity with the person you seek to become. The Stoics understood that transformation is not a single moment of clarity. It is the repeated act of living in accordance with your principles, even when it is uncomfortable. A respect ritual begins with how you speak to yourself. If your inner voice is harsh, uncertain, or dismissive, your outer world will reflect it without fail. You cannot expect others to take you seriously while you constantly belittle your own efforts, dismiss your own accomplishments, or undermine your own instincts. The tone you use with yourself becomes the tone the world adopts. When you treat yourself with dignity, patience, and firmness, your internal standard rises. This shift becomes noticeable. It changes the way you walk, breathe, think, and respond. The ritual starts in the mind before it reaches your behavior. The next part of the ritual is presence. Most people move through life rushed, distracted, or mentally scattered. They speak quickly because they fear being interrupted. They respond impulsively because silence makes them anxious. They walk with tension because they expect criticism. All of this communicates insecurity. Stoic presence is the opposite. Speak slower. Move with intention. Hold silence without panic. Make eye contact without hesitation. These are not superficial behaviors. They are signals of inner steadiness. When your presence becomes calm and deliberate, people adjust to that rhythm. They lean in, they listen, they take you seriously. The ritual continues with behavior that reinforces your standards. This includes keeping your word to yourself. When you say you will wake up earlier and you do, your self-respect increases. When you say you will stop tolerating certain treatment and you enforce it, your self-respect strengthens. When you make a decision and follow through without backtracking, you build a reputation with yourself that others can feel. Confidence is not a feeling. It is evidence that you can trust your own actions. Each time you keep a promise to yourself, you raise the standard for how the world must treat you. Another essential part of this ritual is selective engagement. Not every argument deserves your energy. Not every invitation deserves your presence. Not every person deserves access to your inner circle. When you stop giving your time to those who drain it and stop giving explanations to those who do not deserve them, your value becomes more visible. People respect what is scarce. When your attention is no longer freely available to anyone who asks for it, your presence gains weight. The Stoics believed that wisdom begins with choosing where to place your energy. Respect grows when you protect it. The final part of the ritual is consistency. Anyone can set a boundary once or behave confidently for a day. Real respect comes from sustained alignment. You cannot expect people to take your standards seriously if you abandon them under pressure. You cannot expect others to believe your words if your actions contradict them. The world learns who you are by observing what you repeat. When your boundaries remain firm, your presence remains steady, your choices remain aligned, and your self-talk remains disciplined, your identity solidifies. People begin to treat you as someone who cannot be moved from their principles. This ritual is not a performance. It is the daily practice of living as someone who respects themselves at every level. When this becomes your default state, the world senses it instantly. You no longer need to demand respect. You embody it. And once you embody it, Others follow because respect gravitates toward those who carry themselves with unwavering clarity and inner authority. There comes a day when something inside you refuses to live the way you once did. It does not arrive with drama or noise. It is quieter than that, almost unnoticed at first, yet it shifts the entire direction of your life. It is the day you stop begging for respect and start embodying it. The day you stop trying to prove your worth and begin protecting it. The day you stop chasing validation and begin valuing your own voice above the approval of anyone else. This is the transformation moment, and for most people, it arrives after years of tolerating what their soul could no longer endure. At first, this moment feels like discomfort. You hear yourself agreeing to something and feel a sudden resistance inside. You notice someone crossing a line you used to ignore, and something in you grows still instead of staying silent. You feel the familiar pull to shrink, to apologize, to soften yourself. But this time, you do not move. This time, you recognize the old pattern and choose differently. Confidence does not appear as a surge of power. It appears as a small but undeniable clarity. You are no longer willing to abandon yourself. The Stoics believed that true transformation begins when you stop running from your own reflection. You look at the person you have been, not with shame, but with honesty. You see the moments when you tolerated disrespect because you feared loneliness. You see the times you stayed quiet because you feared rejection. You see the relationships where you accepted crumbs because you believed that was the best you could get. And then you see the cost of these patterns. You see the quiet exhaustion. You see the erosion of your identity. You see the years you lost trying to be someone the world would finally appreciate. This clarity becomes the spark for change. In this moment, your perspective shifts. You begin to understand that respect is not something you receive. It is something you radiate. You realize that confidence is not built from the outside in, but from the inside out. You begin to walk differently, not because you want to impress anyone, but because you finally stand in your own space without shrinking. You speak differently, not because you want to sound powerful, but because you no longer apologize for your existence. You make decisions differently, not because you are unafraid, but because your fears no longer dictate your direction. This transformation does not require perfection. It requires commitment. It requires deciding again and again to act in alignment with your worth, even when the old habits pull you back toward the familiar. Some people will resist this new version of you. They benefited from your silence, your flexibility, your self-abandonment. When you change, the dynamics change with you. This is not a sign that something is wrong. It is proof that you are growing. Those who value you will adjust. Those who do not will drift. Either way, your life becomes aligned with the identity you refuse to express for far too long. There is a profound freedom that comes the moment you stop seeking permission to be who you truly are. You feel a weight lift because you are no longer performing. You are no longer managing other people's opinions. You are no longer negotiating with your own dignity. You are simply living with the quiet force of someone who respects themselves deeply. That force becomes visible. It shapes your relationships, your opportunities, your decisions, and your future. The transformation moment is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning. It is the point where the world starts responding to the new standard you carry. Respect rises, confidence stabilizes, boundaries strengthen. And for the first time, you walk through life with the certainty that you no longer need external approval to stand tall. You stand tall because you finally became the person you needed to be all along. You have reached the point in this journey where everything turns inward. By now, the message is clear. Respect is not something you wait for, hope for, or try to earn through constant effort. Respect begins when you decide that your value is non-negotiable. When you realize that confidence is not a luxury reserved for a chosen few, but a discipline you cultivate through aligned choices. When you understand that every relationship in your life reflects the standard you set for yourself. The moment you choose self-respect, the world has no choice but to recalibrate around you. This decision is not always easy. It requires letting go of old habits that once felt like survival. It requires walking away from people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. It requires embracing silence instead of rushing to fill it with apologies. It requires trusting your voice even when it trembles. Yet the reward for this courage is profound. You gain a sense of identity that no criticism can shake. You gain a presence that speaks before you do. You gain a life that aligns with the person you are becoming, not the person you were forced to be. Stoic wisdom teaches that dignity is not given by others, but earned through the daily act of living in accordance with your principles. When you respect yourself, you move differently through the world. You protect your time, you guard your energy. You choose your battles. You speak clearly, you stand firmly, you act with intention instead of impulse. This is the version of you that cannot be dismissed, manipulated, or overlooked. You are no longer in a quiet negotiation for your worth. You embody it. Before you go, take this truth with you. The world respects those who respect themselves first. Anchor your identity in principle, not in security. Stand on your values, not on the shifting ground of other people's opinions. Become someone who moves through life with clarity, self-command, and unwavering presence. This is how you train the world to see your value. This is how you walk with stoic confidence. This is how you build a life where respect flows naturally, because your actions demand it long before your words ever could. If this video helped shift something inside you, if it reminded you of who you can become, or if it gave you the clarity you needed to take the next step in your own journey, support the channel. Like the video so it reaches more people who need this message. Subscribe for more content built on timeless Stoic wisdom and modern mental resilience, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters, and your growth begins with the moment you choose to claim it.